Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 2 discussion. Welcome to the very last day of Teaser season for patch 0.4.0, which is going live. Well, I'm saying tomorrow, but for you, it might actually be today because it is about 12 hours after this is going to go live. Anyway, today, Granny Gear Games gave us full details of 2 Ascendancies we knew were coming and also one we did not. So they decided to completely surprise us with a new Sorceress Ascendancy. On top of that, they also gave us some endgame gameplay footage of a Druid. Now, I'm going to put that down in the description below. I suggest having a look at that, and I suggest having a close look at it, because some of the builds that they showcase there are reliant upon specific uniques. I'm now more confident than I was yesterday, or perhaps let me rephrase that. I am less apprehensive about League starting a Druid than I was yesterday, but I still think it is the riskier choice. So make up your own mind. Explore the Druid first if that's what you want to do. Just be aware that you might struggle a little bit with the interlude bosses, which can be quite nasty roadblocks on a build that isn't very powerful at that point. However, if you're confident you can power through that, if you're willing to maybe farm up a few levels, a bit of extra gear, in order to make up for the fact that the Druid is just under theory crafted, we don't know very much about it, then the Druid will definitely be a fun way to play the game. And you can see what it looks like at endgame using some of the bear form shenanigans, some of the plant magic shenanigans, some of the wolf form, and also a wyvern build that is built entirely around burninating the countryside by setting up to generate so much rage that you can constantly use that burning ability, the one that spends a lot of rage when you use it. So let's start with what was not revealed today. There was nothing during the Game Awards, which is something that surprised a lot of us because Granny Gear Games were running a promotion encouraging people to watch the Game Awards. We all thought, oh yeah, they've definitely put on some sort of major advert or something. No, they just wanted to support other games, or alternately, they thought that their audience would love the event. Anyways, it was a bunch of fun. I ran a watch party and may have sung along a little bit to Unvia Tema. I'm definitely butchering the name of that, from Expedition 33. So had a lot of fun watching it, and I definitely don't regret it at all, but nothing Path of Exile 2 related there, which was a bit of a surprise. Okay, so let's go through all of the different things that were revealed today. We're going to start with the Shaman. And I'm going to point out, I'm going to go into a bit less detail than I normally would, and that's because I need to get sleep. Tomorrow morning is going to be a very early one for me. I'm going to be up at 3 a.m. probably and be streaming from something like 3:30 my time. The actual league start is 6 o'clock my time. And that means that I need to get this out quickly and then go and do something that is not gaming related at all for a bit, and then go get some sleep and try and be a functioning human being tomorrow for league start. So here's what the Shaman has. There is an interesting 4-point cluster here that begins with Druidic Champion and then leads into Furious Wellspring. So this is the arc that leads to here. Druidic Champion says every 2 rage also grants 1% more spell damage. Now by default, this is not very good. By default, with no other investment in rage, this is providing you with spell damage, but you're going to need to balance gaining rage against spending it. And as a result, I don't think that this is going to be worth an Ascendancy point on its own with no other investment in rage. The thing is, you're playing a Druid, you're probably playing a Bear Druid with this setup, and that means you are investing in rage. And suddenly, Druidic Champion starts to feel a bit better, especially when you consider the option of pairing it with Furious Wellspring. Now, Furious Wellspring has a huge drawback on it. So this is not something that fits on every specific build that could ever be made. This is one of those mechanics that's very much based on a Path of Exile 1 keystone that's existed. It was quite popular for a period in the past, and has then fallen out of favor because for a period it was so good everyone had to use it. Then it got nerfed, and it got nerfed to a point where almost no one wants to use it. Well, Furious Wellspring in Path of Exile 2 is going to do the following. Firstly, you don't inherently lose rage. Secondly, you regenerate 6% of your maximum rage per second. Fair warning, that's not very much. To start out with, you're going to have 37 maximum rage. So this is 2.22 points of rage per second. Now that might sound like a lot until we get to the drawback. Then increases and reductions to mana regeneration rate also apply to rage regeneration rate. This is a huge upside. This is going to get you to 8, 10 rage per second with modest investment. And as long as you're investing in maximum rage, it's going to get you far past that. However, we have a drawback. Skills have +5 to rage cost. This is a very serious drawback because this applies to skills that have a base rage cost of 0. Suddenly, those skills have a cost that you might not be able to pay. So you are going to need to build around this. You can't just throw this in any old build. The payoff is definitely there, but It's something that's going to require you to invest in mana regeneration rate. It's going to require you to invest in maximum rage. It's going to require you to do some work to make this effective. But if you do that, then Druidic Champion is going to give you additional spell damage. It's going to give you a more multiplier to your spell damage. Furious Wellspring is going to make sure that you've got rage to spend all of your slow activating skills that consume a lot of rage. So powerful effect, but not for everyone. Whereas Druidic Champion, this is just something basic. I feel like Furious Wellspring is going to be one of the more commonly taken 4th Ascendancy notables. You don't necessarily want to take this early. It's something that you'll take quite late. We have Wisdom of the Magi. A little bit is known about this. You gain the effect of bonded modifiers on runes and idols. So these are things that you socket into your gear, and essentially this gives them an additional boost over and above what they normally do. Some of these are quite strong, and I do think Wisdom of the Magi is going to be quite good. The thing that's really going to be telling with this, though, is how good it is with the rarer of the runes and idols and things like that. How good that ends up being is going to determine a lot here. That's going to just transform the way characters play. It's also going to transform the way you gear characters. So keep this one in mind. I feel like this could be strong even in Act 2 when you first get it, and assuming you do decide to take it first, and then it's just going to get better from there, but it's going to be much better when you've already got access to all of the good runes that you want. Sacred Flow, plus 40 to Spirit for each of your empty charm slots. Really hard to judge this until we know how good charms are, so I'm just going to have to say with this one, wait and see. We don't know any more about it. After this, we have the defensive side, which is Reactive Growth and Avatar of Evolution. Reactive Growth is quite strong. Avatar of Evolution is extraordinarily strong in a particular niche, but that niche is not something you can absolutely rely upon. So let's talk about where this is going to be absolutely god tier. That is when you're fighting the harder of the Citadel bosses, Jamunra. Jamunra, this is going to be amazing on because he pretty much does only lightning and physical damage. Avatar of Evolution is going to take some of the edge off the physical damage that you take, and Reactive Growth, especially with doubled adaptation effect, is going to massively, massively scale up the amount of lightning mitigation that you've got. So, Reactive Growth is 10% less elemental damage taken. Adapt to the highest elemental damage type of each hit that you take, and each adaptation grants 10% less elemental damage taken of that adaptation's type. So if you're suffering lightning damage, then this is going to be 3 stacks of 10% less damage, or 3 stacks of 20% less damage with Avatar of Evolution. However, the problem is going to be when you encounter some sort of hit that deals something else. So you're fighting against a boss, let's say it's not Jamunra because Jamunra won't have ads usually. You're fighting against a boss and then a stray fireball comes from off screen and catches you. Suddenly, you lose quite a bit of your lightning mitigation, and that's something you've got to really watch with this. This has a best case scenario where it is absolute god mode, but you're not always going to be in that best case scenario. So strong 4-pointer defensive cluster. Where does this become absolutely godly? It becomes absolutely godly if you are converting incoming damage into a consistent element quite well. So keep that one in mind. That is going to make Avatar of Evolution really good. If you can make it so that Reactive Growth is mostly triggering to the same element, almost always triggering the same element, then you're going to have fantastic defenses out of this cluster. After this, we have Bringer of the Apocalypse and Turning of the Seasons. Turning of the Seasons is one of those not quite good enough 2-pointers. However, it does gate Bringer of the Apocalypse behind it. Bringer of the Apocalypse, we've got to see how good it is. We can't really answer that as yet. It does some pretty explosive stuff. You hit enemies with elemental damage. This builds up glory. You spend all your glory at once, and you trigger an Apocalypse where you do a whole bunch of elemental damage on a quite short cooldown to enemies that are nearby. Essentially, it's 12 seconds of God mode when you set it off. So that's the goal with Apocalypse itself. The node that leads up to it, enemies in your presence have exposure. This is a reasonably strong effect, except for the fact that you can get it elsewhere. So that's an effect. It's useful. You do want it, but it's not quite good enough. And then the secondary part of it is 10% of damage as extra damage of a random element. Again, this is not nothing, but this is not a full node's worth of power. Here we have Turning of the Seasons. Feels to me like it's 3/4 the power level of what an Ascendancy notable should be. This means that Bringer of the Apocalypse has to be better. Otherwise, you'd be inclined not to take this cluster. So it's an option to take, but I think Avatar of Evolution and Reactive Growth are where the real power is here. There is definitely niche utility in Furious Wellspring, definitely not for every build. Most builds should not take this. Wisdom of the Magi, Druidic Champion, they're solid as well. If in doubt, you want to play the Shaman, Wisdom of the Magi, Druidic Champion, Reactive Growth, Avatar of Evolution. Probably take them in the order, with Druidic Champion being the last of the 4, I'd say. That'd be the way I'd go. So Wisdom of the Magi first, Reactive Growth second, Avatar of Evolution third, Druidic Champion fourth. That's the default setup, but of course, customize away. Don't feel you need to stick to that. Second, I could talk about the Oracle, but I would rather actually talk about something else. Why don't we command the Djinn? The Disciple of Varashta is something we did not know was coming until today. Grinding Gear Games decided, let's have a surprise, an additional Sorceress Ascendancy. Now here, you play as a sorceress that draws her power from the Djinn, and you gain access to some really interesting things here. So I want to start with the generalist section of this tree, which is actually down the bottom of the thing that I'm displaying on screen at the moment, which is Grinding Gear Games' summary of this content. We'll come back to Ruzkan, we'll come back to Navira, and we'll come back to Kalari. Instead, we're going to start by talking about things that are not tied to any of these djinns, and we're going to go looking at these 2 pointers and 1 4-pointer that you can allocate. Let's start with the 4-pointer. We have the 4th teaching, which is a generic good stuff energy shield node of medium power. -1 second to base energy shield recharge delay, 40% more energy shield recharge rate while you are on low energy shield. So this is what I would term middling strength. This is a very live defensive setup, but it's not something that's amazing. However, it leads down to Sacred Rituals, and Sacred Rituals, this one is genuinely strong. 60% of your current energy shield is added to your armor for purposes of determining your physical damage reduction from armor. So you've got 10,000 energy shield on your character. Well, while you are at full energy shield, you've got 6,000 armor as well. You're at 5,000 energy shield. Well, at this point, you've only got 3,000 armor. And this is not as strong as the full effect of having armor on a character, because when you've got real armor on your character that's not this pseudo armor that you get from Sacred Rituals, it can also apply in part to elemental damage taken. That's not going to work here because this appears to be pseudo armor. It's not true armor as you would normally expect it to be. Instead, it is simply added to your armor for the purposes of one particular calculation. As much as people like to meme on armor, it is actually something that is a very live stat in Path of Exile 2 now. I also feel it's going to get better in this patch. And the reason I say that is that the density changes that are taking place in this patch are going to mean that some of the extreme burst damage windows that you can take, where armor just doesn't mitigate enough quickly enough, they won't be an issue anymore. So with that in mind, Sacred Rituals is something that at least strikes me as being reasonable. After this, we have the one that I feel is most disappointing. Varashta's Intuition. 100% of elemental damage is taken from mana before life. Note that this is mana before life. This is not mana before energy shield. So firstly, let's talk about the non-combo with Chaos Inoculation. If you have Varashta's Intuition and Chaos Inoculation on your character, then you're going to be taking damage from your energy shield first. When the energy shield expires, all of the elemental damage that you take is going to be hit from your mana. That sounds fantastic, until you catch a stray single point of physical damage, at which point that goes straight to your life total because you don't have any energy shield left and it's not directed to your mana. This is a non-combo in conjunction with Chaos Inoculation because you will take those stray physical hits. However, when you're dealing with a monster that is dealing a mixture of physical and elemental damage, most of them it's not 50-50. It'll be one attack is all physical, the next attack is all lightning, the next attack is 75% lightning, 25% physical. Varashta's Intuition is going to be an amazing defensive layer against some of those hits. Now, if you are a very, very mechanically skilled player, you can probably exploit this really well. You can learn a boss's mechanics very, very well, and you can say, okay, Varashta's Intuition is going to make me really safe against X, Y, and Z ability, but I still need to dodge from that one. And then you get out of the way when that one comes up. And that's fine. But the other problem you've got here is that you need to have monstrously big mana recovery in order to still be able to cast your skills, but you need to do this alongside still needing life recovery, maybe still needing energy shield recovery. Ultimately, this is going to be sending your defensive scaling down too many different paths, and those paths do not scale multiplicatively with each other. And therefore, I would go with something else that scales multiplicatively with your other investment on your character, like Sacred Rituals. After this, we have Instruments of Power. Well, people have been saying, I want to use a focus, I want to use a wand, I want to use a staff, I want them all. Well, with Instruments of Power, you can. Now, you can equip a focus while wielding a staff. However, you only get half the benefits from your equipped focus. There are definitely going to be situations where this is absolutely amazing, especially if there are any foci out there that have a powerful effect that doesn't really scale, where it's not something that's a number, it's just something that's a straight effect. Ultimately, this is going to give you +1 level of gems in most situations, because I believe you can still roll +2 to spell gems on a focus, you just can't roll +3 anymore. And you'll also get a bunch of other effects on top of that as well. These effects will be smaller than they'd be on a real offhand, but you can use a two-handed staff as well. Instruments of Power probably at its best if you want to use a unique focus alongside a caster staff or alongside a particular unique staff, like the new Whispering Ice. Then we have Baryonic Ley Lines. Non-unique Time Lost Jewels. These are the special jewels that affect an area on your tree. They come out of the Trials of the Sekma. They have 40% increased radius. 40% increased radius doesn't sound like much, right? Actually, that's a lot more than it sounds like. That is 96% more area that they affect. So depending upon your passive tree, this could be absolutely incredible. This is one of those things, though, that you would really have to distort your build around. So it's something that, whilst it is generically powerful, it's only going to actually have a real payoff if you're doing certain types of tree textures. I feel like this is something that will take a long time for the player base to solve thoroughly. What's my 4 points if I was to go into making one of these disciples without going into all of the new summoning mechanics that are associated with it? I'd be inclined to go the Fourth Teaching, Sacred Rituals, Instruments of Power, and I would go Baryonic Ley Lines and just work out getting as much value out of it as you can. That said, Baryonic Ley Lines is going to be the weakest node on the tree, and it's also one that you'll get fairly late in your character's progression. You might put off your 4th Ascendancy for a while because you're going to need to have a decent Time Lost Jewel. Also, very important reminder, this is non-unique Time Lost Jewels only. So, unique Time Lost Jewels, sorry. After this, we're going to go through the rest of this Ascendancy. The rest of this Ascendancy focuses on summoning 3 specific entities. There is Rozhan the Blazing Sword, who, as you might guess, is a fire djinn. Then there is Navira, the Last Mirage, and there is Kalari. So Rozhan is an invulnerable flame djinn minion, and he'll do your bidding. He emerges to strike enemies with his greatsword whenever you use a damaging skill, and he casts devastating fire spells when you actively command him to do so. On top of this, it's only 1 point to pick up Rozhan here. After that, you can then spec further in order to give him additional commands. So Rozhan's Trap is one that feels like it's evocative of Explosive Trap from Path of Exile 1, maybe. So it commands Rozhan to hurl his greatsword, spreading hazardous runes on the ground where it lands. If an enemy steps on a rune, it erupts in a fiery tornado that deals spell damage. After this, we have Rozhan's Reckoning, another command. This one commands Rozhan to teleport to the target location, and then upon arriving, he deals spell damage to enemies around him, then slams his blazing sword into the ground, creating a wave of lava that also deals spell damage. And then there is Rozhan's Fury, which commands Rozhan to conjure 2 volleys of flaming embers and fire them forward. The embers explode on impact, dealing spell damage. It's going to be really hard to work out which of these are the best and which ones of them are the worst. After this, we have Navira, the Last Mirage. Default on Navira is that it is an invulnerable water djinn minion that will do your bidding, will only act when commanded, and will bestow restorative blessings upon you and your allies with her spells. There is Navira's Fracturing, which will cause Navira to fracture all areas of chilled ground that have enemies standing on them, dealing high spell damage with extreme freeze potential. Navira's Oasis, this will command Navira to turn nearby chilled enemies into Navira's Oasis, a mirage which grants you and allies standing in it flask charges, and damage recouped as life and mana. Plants that are in the area, they become overgrown, so if you're using any of the plant spells, then you got that as a little bonus. And then there's Navira as well, where Navira is commanded to bolster your energy shield, causing it to begin recharging immediately, and granting you increased energy shield recharge rate for a duration. Now keep in mind, if you do want to spec into Navira, it's 1 point just to get Navira herself, it is 2 points if you want to pick up one of these effects, and it is 4 points if you want to pick up the whole cluster. And that's something we'll have to work out whether it's worth doing or not. After this, we have Kalari, the Tainted Sands. Kalari is an invulnerable sand djinn minion, and he'll do your bidding. Kalari will only act when you command him to do so, and he delivers swift hits with massive critical hit potential. Kalari's Malediction is one point that you can spec into. This will harness his power to passively consume corpses in your presence. This will cause beetle minions to burst forth. The beetles will passively follow you until they're commanded, and then upon your command, they will rush the target and explode. This is going to be a very difficult one to use, but it could be quite effective for clearing. It's something that's going to live or die based upon how long it takes those beetles to run to their corpses. Also, there is a maximum of 8 corpse beetles active at any given time, and it is a 0.9 second duration between corpse consumptions. So each time you use Kalari's Malediction, it is going to destroy one corpse and create 2 of these beetles, and that's 900 milliseconds apart, which is somewhat of a limiting factor on it. I don't think this one's going to be too crazy, but it does do something useful. After this, we have Kalari's Deception. This one is going to command Kalari to create a blast at the target location, deal spell damage, and leaves behind a clone that persists for a short duration. The skill can store multiple charges. Using it again while a clone from a previous one is still active causes the clone to explode, dealing even more damage. So this one's interesting. This allows you to do a lot of damage in one location really effectively, and that seems to be the strength of it. Now, this is going to be one that you can only store up 3 uses on by default, but you might want to support this with something that increases that limit a little bit, and then you might find that you're able to get this to do quite a lot. After this, we have Kalari's Judgment. This will channel and command Kalari to channel alongside you, creating blades that hang over the target location. The longer you channel, the more blades Kalari will create. Upon release, his blades plunge into the ground and create shockwaves that deal spell damage. This one, like a lot of the others here, it's going to live or die based upon how the numbers feel and how the damage projection feel compared to other things that you could potentially get. Now, one thing I want to point out here, a bit of a limitation with this whole Disciple of Varashta Ascendancy here. A lot of things here are encouraging you to spend points in additive sources of character power rather than multiplicative ones. So you're getting a bunch of new abilities here, but you're not getting anything that really multiplies your character's strength in most of these situations. That's something that's worth keeping in mind because it will impact the way that you assess these notables. If you take 4 20% more multipliers, you don't end up with 180% power, you end up with 207.36% base power. And that's because that multiplication is quite a bit more than the adding. And I think we might have a situation here with this Ascendancy where you just want to balance the amount of points that you take carefully and give a lot of thought to all of them. How much do you want to spend on the minions? How much do you want to spend on making them better? Versus how much do you want to spend on your base character? I'll jump to the Oracle in a sec, but I also wanted to announce Grinding Gear Games' other important announcement today, and this is another set of Twitch drops. Now, this one includes a Toucan treasure chest. That's right, there is a Toucan treasure chest coming as a result of these MTX. You can't get that one until the second week. So sometimes you feel like playing the game, sometimes you don't feel like playing the game, you feel like watching someone else play it. These are a payoff for doing exactly that. The Path of Exile Twitch drops are a promo that they've run plenty of times before, and the first lot of them is going to go for 1 week and 16 hours. So this is going to be from league start up to 186 hours after league start. This is going to provide the Blood Moon Wolfpack skill effect for watching people play the game on Twitch for a total of 3 hours, and also the Mask of the Vaal, a cosmetic MTX. Week 2, Atziri's Royal Cache Stash Bundle. This is going to go for 8 days, commencing right at the moment that the previous one ends. And again, it is 3 hours of accumulated watch time. And Grinding Gear Games have decided they want to double down on this marketing approach of marketing to people that already watch Twitch quite a bit by running a supporter streamer promo. These are absolutely fantastic for those of us that stream. I know a lot of people meme about Grinding Gear Games going out of their way to give streamers better RNG or things like that because I think that streamers like that. No, what we like is actually when they run something like this. Instead of the money for various MTX going to Grinding Gear Games, it will go to the people who advertise their game on Twitch. So if there's a particular streamer that you like there, me or someone else, then you can buy a Twitch subscription during the qualifying period. All the details of that down in the description below, but it starts when the league goes live. I do wish they would start at 15 minutes earlier, but anyways, it starts when the league goes live, and it goes through a little bit more than 14 days after that. If you buy 2 total Twitch subs and Prime subs do not count for this, they need to be real subs, then you will receive the new MTX that they're awarding there. So your highlights might vary, but this is the Atziri's Royal Cache Stash skin. This is one of the free ones. And yes, that is a toucan sitting on the edge of it. That's the reason it's a highlight for me. Your highlights might vary. Maybe one of the others jumps out more to you. That's the week 2 free one. The week 1 and 2 one that is not free, but that is the support a streamer deal. And that one is this portal, which I quite like as well. I'll have to make sure I get this one myself. Now, if you are following a different streamer than myself, just make sure that they're streaming in the Path of Exile 2 category. That's all that's needed for it to qualify, as long as it's in the qualifying period. And as always, the details are down in the description below. Right, so let's jump over to the Oracle next. The Oracle is an interesting one in that it has some really, really crazy mathematics involved in it. We will come to forced outcome last. So forced outcome is one where the mathematics behind it are so cursed that I had to make a spreadsheet in order to try and parse how good it is, and where the inflection point is where it becomes better than lucky critical hits would be. So we'll come to that one last. Let's go through the rest. Firstly, we have the Unseen Path. Now, this is one that was teased in the original live stream announcement. This one adds a huge amount of extra stuff onto the passive tree. This will live or die based upon how good those nodes are, and also based upon how well we can use entwined realities, because this is a prerequisite as well for entwined realities. Entwined realities, though, this thing is crazy. Non-keystone passive skills in medium radius of allocated keystone passive skills can be allocated without being connected to your tree. So for those of you who play Path of Exile 1, what this means, if you allocate Imbalanced Guard, you also get the entire benefits of Impossible Escape Imbalanced Guard version, which is really cool. So this is going to allow you in a best case scenario where you can deal with the downsides that are present on some of these keystone passives. In those situations, it's going to allow you to jump quite a bit around the passive tree. It's therefore just going to increase the density of good nodes that you're able to allocate. However, there is a drawback to this, and that is that all those keystones, they all have drawbacks. Some of them are manageable, some of them are not. For example, if you're playing a critical strikes build, Resolute Technique has a drawback that is so overwhelmingly bad for you that you're going to end up having a very bad time if you pick entwined realities with it. So you got to keep this one in mind. This is going to be a very, very hard build design problem to solve. Entwined realities does some crazy things. The Unseen Path does some crazy things, but this is going to be the thing that is going to get solved last by the player base. We have Harmony Within. Harmony Within, hit damage is taken from mana before life if your current mana is higher than your current life. 15% less maximum life, 15% less maximum mana. So we have a very, very real drawback associated with this node. The fact that hit damage being taken from mana before life is so strong, and that this is going to happen unless you fall very low on mana, can be very, very, very good indeed. Unnamed Heartwood is next. This is a totem node, +1 maximum number of summoned totems, and your totems persist an additional 6 seconds after their life falls to 0. All of this is good stuff if you care about totems. Totems are definitely something that is tough to build around, but that it is possible. And there is definitely support for it that's available in the game, but it's going to be on endgame unique items rather than something you can do from the start of the game. And after this, we have the other 2 pointers. Fateful Vision, this grants a skill called Align Fate, and Converging Paths, this grants a skill called Moment of Vulnerability. So Fateful Vision and Align Fate. The first time I recorded this, I rambled on for 3.5 minutes about it. I think we want to condense that a little bit. This is a very, very complex skill. It creates a minigame. Now, I'm going to call this the Simon Says minigame. Simon Says picks one of the skills at random from your first weapon set, and it doesn't include any invalid weapons that you've got. So if you've got an invalid weapon set in your first hand, then it'll use the second set. But this is going to pick something from your first weapon set that's available, and it's going to pick that skill at random. Then it's going to display it on screen. If you cast that skill, you're going to get a bonus for it. However, you're only going to get that bonus once. How often does this go off? Once per 9.15 seconds initially. However, the more variance that you build into this by selecting more skills that are available here, and they have to be spells, then this is going to decrease the cooldown. It's going to increase your cooldown recovery on it. So your Visage frequency on this, it starts actually at 125%, not at 100%. So 125% would mean that this is 7.32 seconds. If you only have one spell, then once per 7.32 seconds, a Visage is going to appear casting that spell. Then your next cast of that spell is going to be empowered. But If you decide to go with 2 spells, instead, it's going to be every 6.1 seconds, but you won't have as much agency over which spells get empowered. If you decide to go with a lot more spells, then suddenly you're going to be able to use more of these Align Fate spells, but because you have less agency over which ones come up, it's going to be less good on average. This is a really interesting design. I don't know that I'm sold on 9.15 seconds though. This is something that needs to be seen and tested in order to work out whether it's any good or not, but at the very least, it's a very interesting design. Next, we have Moment of Vulnerability. This is a very, very complex set of text. Let me break it down for you. Firstly, you can only effectively use this when a monster is prime for stun, prime for electrocution, or prime for freeze. If you do meet this criteria, and you remember to cast Moment of Vulnerability is like a monstrously amped up curse on that monster. It's then going to cause that monster to take a tremendous additional amount of damage, because not only are they going to take the damage, but an echo of them is also going to be dealt to that monster as well. By default, this is going to take your damage from 100% base to 198% base, and so that's potentially a very, very strong effect. However, this one's important. You can only hit a given monster once per 10 seconds with this effect. So it's one of those things that in stars aligned situations is going to be amazing. Where is this going to be at its best? It's going to be at its best if you are fighting a boss and you are very confident that you can get that boss stunned really early in the fight. And then once you've got them stunned, you just don't want them getting out of that stun. You want to then cast Moment of Vulnerability as the first thing you do after they're stunned or after they're primed for stun, and then you just lay into them and don't let them get up. That's the goal for it. It's to turn a quick stun routine on a boss into a quick kill on that boss. Is this worth Ascendancy points? That's up to you. I think most people the answer is going to be no, but there will be some use cases for it. All right, now let's talk about the complex ones. The lesser harm, enemy critical hit chance against you is unlucky. Critical hit chance from monsters does not scale as high in Path of Exile 2 as it does in Path of Exile 1. Generally speaking, you're looking like 20% if you've set things up so that the monster has more crit than usual. And when a monster has a 20% chance to crit you, unlucky is actually pretty good. For them to successfully crit you, they need to get a 4% stars aligned outcome. So this is going to be reasonably good already. The second aspect of this, damage of enemies hitting you, is unlucky. Unlucky means roll twice, take the worst roll. That's always the case. What does that mean in practice for average damage taken? Most monsters in the game deal 80% to 120% damage. In this situation, the average damage that monster deals is 100. However, when they're unlucky, the average damage they do is 93 and a third percent. And for people that want to see where that comes from, it is something you can derive yourself with calculus, but we won't go through this in this video because this is not a maths lesson. This is a gaming video. Anyways, that's the lesser harm. Generally speaking, this is going to be 6 and a 6% less damage that you take, but it is going to be more favorable when it comes to very big hits because it is going to make it less likely that the monster rolls an outlier high roll. And for that reason, I think this is somewhat of a defensive layer. The main thing is the fact that the crits are also unlucky. This is just going to really smooth out the amount of damage that you take. It's not necessarily going to be a tremendous decrease in total damage that your character suffers, but it's going to be a substantial decrease in the amount of big hits that you suffer. And often, but not always, the big hits are the scariest ones. That's the lesser harm. After this, we have forced outcome. Now, it's worth noting that I was chatting with people on stream about interpretations of this text. It just says inevitable critical hits. And what this means is that hits which could potentially be a critical, but do not roll a critical, they re-roll their critical hit chance until they succeed. But the game tracks the number of times it has to re-roll. Then it says hits have 30% less critical damage bonus for each time critical hit chance was re-rolled. So let's start with a situation where it's unambiguous. You've got 50% critical strike chance against an enemy. You attack them, you fail to crit. You then roll again on that critical roll, and this second time you do succeed. In this case, you deal 70% of the bonus critical damage that you would normally do. So you get 100% base damage because of hit, but you also get 70% of whatever your critical hit multiplier would be, or your critical damage bonus in Path of Exile 2 terms. So that's the unambiguous thing. But what happens if you reroll twice? My interpretation was that you get 30% less of 30% less, which is going to be 49% of base damage. And then if it rerolls 3 times, 34.3%, 4 times, 24.01%, 5 times, 16.807%. However, The other interpretation, and I'm not certain that I'm right on this, the other interpretation is that if you reroll once, 70% damage, you reroll twice, 40% damage, 3 times, 10%, 4 or more times, 0% bonus critical damage. I don't know which of these two is correct. Anyways, assuming that I am correct, assuming it is the more favorable of the two interpretations, let's bring up that fun little spreadsheet that we put together there, and this will have the details of exactly what it looks like at various critical hit chances. So let's start with where it is exactly equal in power level to having lucky critical hits, and that is about 57%. See, here is what I would term your effective critical hit chance. So you're always critically hitting, but this is a measure of the average amount of damage that you get from your criticals here. If you didn't have this node, it would just be 57%, because 57% of the time you'd get 100% the benefits of a crit, 43% of the time you'd get 0% the benefits of a crit, and the average there is 57%. So here you're looking at 81.66% effective critical hits. Now, let's try it with some different numbers. Let's firstly try with an extraordinarily high critical hit chance. And you'll see here that it is worse than being lucky crit. Lucky crit would be 99% effective critical hit chance. Here, we're looking 96.77%. What about if we go with 50%? Here, you'll see it is just slightly better. Not much better, but just slightly better than if you were to have lucky crits. What about 30%? Here, you'll see it's quite a bit better than lucky critical strikes would be. Here, you're looking at 58.82%. What about if we were to go with 10%? Here, it's almost 3 times as good as not having this notable, and it is quite a lot better than having lucky critical hits would be. What if we went with 1%? And here we start hitting some limits with my Excel spreadsheet. And I'll just point out that this is just a geometric series. It's not something where getting an absolute answer is impossible, but I'm lazy and the spreadsheet is the easy way to do this. So let's instead go with 3%, where that's not going to be the problem. And here you'll see it is more than 3 times as good as not having this node, but being lucky would be quite good there as well. And so it's still better than lucky. Anyways, the breakpoint is about 57.2%. If you have less than 57.2%, then this 4-point notable is superior to having lucky critical hits based upon my interpretation of the way that the damage decays as it takes more and more rerolls to hit. However, the other interpretation could be correct, and if it is, then this node is worse than I think it is, worse in every possible way. So, should you take this? Yes, it is a pretty strong node, but you need to have a reasonable investment in criticals, but be unable to get to a very, very high level of investment. You want to reach a point where you've invested a fair bit into criticals, you're at least 30 or 40% critical strike chance, and then at that point, it's going to then multiply the effect of all of your other critical investment that you've made. So for that reason, I think this is a reasonably strong 4-pointer. It's not an amazingly strong 4-pointer, but the 2-pointer before it is quite nice as well defensively, and there's lots of other cool stuff that's going on inside this particular Ascendancy. Anyways, 3 Ascendancies, all detailed in this video. This was meant to be a short video, and I've gone for like 48 minutes and 40 seconds in my original draft. We'll see how long it ends up once I edit it, and I really need to get to sleep, so I'm going to leave it there. May your Varlorbs have interesting results, and I will see you around.